Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week we discuss the potential Ballon d'Or winners this year and what it takes to claim that honor. For this conversation, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Tian Yu and Brandon Yates. Alright, Paris Saint-Germain has won the first ever UEFA Champions League trophy in club history after a 5-0 crushing victory against Inter Milan in the final. That historic title means they have achieved a treble season, and right after the season finale in Munich, Ousmane Dembele has become the betting favorite for this year's Ballon d'Or award. In 49 games he played this season, he recorded 33 goals and 15 assists, remarkable stats, and most importantly, it seems like he's getting more mature and more efficient on the pitch. So, Tian Yu, first question. Do you agree that Ousmane Dembele is the top candidate for this year's Ballon d'Or, and what changes do you think he has gone through over the years?
Yeah, I think we've always known that Dembele has been gifted. He's got that, rare blend of top-tier dribbling, electric speed, and something even fewer players have, which is his excellent two-footed ability. Defenders can never predict which way he would go, and that unpredictability has made him a nightmare to defend. And but for years, the conversation around Dembele wasn't just about talent; it was about his attitude, whether he would ever really capitalize on his talent and become a superstar. Because back when he was in Barcelona, he showed some signs of brilliance, but the reports just kept going against him. The professionalism just wasn't there. We've been hearing stories about him, like how he was staying up late, gaming on his PlayStation, and just not taking care of his body seriously. And I feel like he was, coasting on talent without the mentality to match. But that version of Dembele was gone, because since joining PSG and, under the coach of Luis Enrique, the transformation has been incredible. I mean, under Enrique's system and guidance, he's become maturer, and not just as a player, but also as a pro. He's become more focused, composed, and most importantly, selfless. He stepped into roles that aren't even natural for him, like operating as a central striker. I mean, dropping deeper into the midfield and creating spaces for his teammates instead of just hunting for personal glory. And I would say he's become a playmaker on the pitch. Setting up guys like Kvaratskhelia, Desiree Doué. He's been drawing defenders in and reading the game and knowing when to slow it down or when to explode. So his football IQ has leveled up, I would say. And I would say the biggest difference for me came from his work rates. Because this season, he's been everywhere, running from box to box, pressing relentlessly, tracking back, and putting in defensive shifts we never saw from him before. He's not just a spark in an attack anymore. He's become vital to PSG's balance across the pitch. So when it comes to the Ballon d'Or, we're not just talking about highlight reels from a certain player anymore. And instead, we're talking about impact, leadership, and contribution and evolution. And for me, I think that growth and that transformation we've seen from Dembele this season into a complete player is exactly why he deserves to be a strong contender in the Ballon d'Or race.
Right. Brandon, it seems like Ousmane Dembele has become a totally different person just over 2 years. So what do you think is the turning point for him in his career?
I mean, there's a couple of things, well, first of all, in terms of the Ballon d'Or conversation, I think at this point in the season, post-Champions League and post-domestic season, in my opinion, there's absolutely no question. I think what he's been able to do, and as an individual and as a leader for PSG, both domestically and on the European stage, and having brought PSG their first Champions League title, which is something that superstars like Kylian Mbappe, Lionel Messi, Neymar, Angel Di Maria, all of these players that have come into PSG but still weren't able to bring the Champions League trophy that they've been so desperate for so long. I mean, Dembele was probably the shining light. A lot of that has to do with the responsibility that he's taken on and just the maturity that he's shown as an individual and as a player. And I think that a lot of that has to go down with what he's done as an individual. So, like we've already mentioned, focusing on his fitness and avoiding injuries and taking care of his body and taking training more seriously and taking accountability. And, I think a couple of people around him, Luis Enrique in particular, also deserve a lot of credit. I think that since coming back to PSG, he seems to be a lot more responsibility has been placed on his shoulders, and I think he's taken that role on quite well. I can't think of any other, team, maybe besides his later days at Dortmund, but certainly not at Barcelona, where, he is, seen as like the pinnacle character and someone that's supposed to drive the team forward and lead the team onto success and, be a leader in the team and a mature, voice in the team. And he seems to have taken that role on at PSG quite well. And I guess Luis Enrique deserves a lot of credit for, first of all, giving him that responsibility, but also figuring out how to get the best out of him in terms of what he can do on and off the pitch. I mean, at Barcelona, I think he maybe didn't take on that responsibility relatively well and, maybe struggled with the spotlight and that sort of thing. And maybe also struggled being away from home. I think a lot of the conversation hasn't taken into consideration that, Dembele is French and now he is back in France. And I think for a lot of French players in particular that we've seen in the past, I think some supremely talented players have struggled away from home, particularly with attitude issues. I think sometimes they're misunderstood, and when they are misunderstood, they seem to take that negatively. I think of the likes of Paul Pogba and Anthony Martial at Manchester United, of course, supremely talented superstars in their own right, but I think a lot of their attitude and the way that they approached training sessions and that sort of thing was misunderstood by certain coaches and teammates. Look, I'm sure a lot of it had to do with a lack of effort, but sometimes, I think there's a French attitude that like sometimes it's not best to give your all in training and then kind of save it for match days, which I think sometimes English coaches and English players don't take to that sort of attitude particularly well. And maybe in Spain there was, cultural issues, language issues. We're not look, Dembele didn't exactly help with like, there were instances where he showed up late to training and, like we've already mentioned, stayed up all hours of the night, playing online games, which is something I'm guilty of as well. But I'm also, not a professional athlete, and I'm not earning, hundreds of thousands of pounds a week, so it's quite weird that someone in that position wouldn't be disciplined. But regardless, I think since the move to PSG, since taking on the leadership role, since being able to be the star man of the team and not sharing the spotlight, finding a position that works best for you and being at home, a lot of these factors also probably combined with other factors that we don't even know about, that could also be attributed to Dembele's success this season. But the numbers don't lie, the stats don't lie, the titles don't lie. At this point now where we are, Ousmane Dembele is head and shoulders above any other players.
I think there must be someone in Dembele's personal life that tells him, dude, you have to change. You are a magician. You're always a magician on the pitch with the ball, but your game attitude, it has to be changed. And I guess that mentor is Luis Enrique, and he's the reason why Dembele has this overnight evolution.
Yeah.
Back in Dembele's Barcelona time, there was a lot of finger pointing towards him, inconsistent performance, injury problems, He was labeled as the bad boy within the team.
Yeah.
I think his signature performance was the 2019 Champions League semi-final first leg game against Liverpool. Barcelona was leading by 3-0 and Dembele was offered at least 2 or 3 scoring chances that could seal Barca's progression, but one after another he squandered them all. The following plot, we all know Liverpool made a remarkable comeback with a 4-0 win at home and eliminated Barcelona from the semi-finals.
Yeah.
But with PSG, he's a totally different person now. He's no longer a winger obsessed with dribbling past defenders. He's now a fake nine and a playmaker, creating opportunities around the penalty area. And most importantly, he's more disciplined than ever. He's the first defender on the team that constantly press the opponent's defense line and goalkeeper. I think there was a moment in the Champions League final in Munich that well circulated on Chinese social media. Dembele looks super concentrated, like he's going for a 100-meter race when Inter was about to play a goal kick.
Yeah.
He gets himself ready any minute to sprint in front to interfere Inter's backline. That moment really impressed me. And
yeah, me too.
Yeah, it reminds me this is a different Dembele now. As usual, before we move on, let's quickly review the biggest sports stories of the past week. Chinese player Zheng Qinwen bowed out of the French Open quarterfinals after a straight set loss to world number 1 Arena Sabalenka. Sabalenka had lost to Zheng for the first time in 7 meetings just last month in Rome. The Belarusian took over this time with firepower and eventually went through 7-6, 6-3. Zheng said her game plan worked quite well, but unforced errors cost her the match.
I think my game plan is working quite well. It's just I'm not able today to stick on to do it, my game plan from the beginning until the end, because I just think sometimes I give her so many easy unforced errors.
Zheng Qinwen won the Paris Olympic title at the same venue last year. Saudi Pro League champion Al Hilal has named Simone Inzaghi as the new head coach. The 49-year-old Italian signed a 2-year deal after parting ways with Inter Milan, who lost to Paris Saint-Germain 5-0 in the Champions League final. Reports say the contract could be worth up to 30 million euros or over $34 million per season. The New York Knicks have parted ways with head coach Tom Thibodeau just days after their Eastern Conference Finals exit at the hands of Indiana Pacers in Game 6. Thibodeau guided Knicks to the playoffs in 4 of his 5 seasons, including this year's deep run to the franchise's first conference finals appearance in 25 years. Despite his success in revitalizing the team and instilling a defensive identity, the organization has opted for a new direction in pursuit of a championship. German table tennis club Saarbrücken has signed Olympic gold medalist Fan Zhendong for next season's German Table Tennis League. Fan's new teammate Truls Morigard welcomed him to the team.
It feels amazing having Fan Zhendong as a teammate next year. He's a great player and an even better person, so we're really looking forward to having him in the team.
Fan won singles and team gold at Paris 2024, completing his career Grand Slam. The Chinese Table Tennis Association has expressed support for Fan's move. After 13 days in the deserts of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the Taklamakan Rally has wrapped up. The Hoto Factory racing team swept motorcycle podium, while driver Liu Yanggui and navigator Chen Feng led the Shanxi Yunxiang Club to top honors in the car category. Xinjiang reports.
I'm here at the N39 Desert Scenic Area in Market County, Kashgar Prefecture, China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. This is the finish line of this year's Taklamakan Rally. Launched in 2005, the rally has grown into Asia's longest, largest, and most competitive off-road race. The 2025 edition features 23 motorcycles and 105 vehicles navigating roughly 5,200 kilometers over 13 days.
Alright, welcome back. Another video that went viral on the internet lately. Luis Enrique rebuked Kylian Mbappe back in his PSG time. In that leaked video clip, Enrique talked to Mbappe face-to-face privately in a small room. He said, quote here, "I know your idol is Michael Jordan, so you should play like Michael Jordan. Do the best to defend and motivate the whole team. You must set an example of the whole squad, first as a person, then as a player. To do so, you need to press the opponent's defense line and goalkeeper constantly. You think you can only focus on attack? Of course, you are a phenomenal player in attack. Nobody can guard you. But that is not enough to me. A real leader knows how to help the team in defense when their offense is off. That is Michael Jordan." It's an incredibly powerful and motivating, inspiring speech made by Enrique to me. By the way, that speech was made 2 months before Mbappe left PSG for Real Madrid. But to me, Mbappe hasn't achieved what Enrique told him either with PSG or Real Madrid, but Dembele has done it. So Tianyu, Mbappe has been seen as the biggest star after Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. What do you make of his leadership? Does it really match Jordan's level?
Well, we can hardly say so because, as a Real Madrid fan, I've got nothing but respect for Mbappe's what he has done this season because, he has really stepped up in clutch moments when the team's like through some rough patches, and he's been lifting the team when the morale was low. His shooting power, his speed, the precision is still there. He's still world class. But we have to admit that what Enrique said makes sense because, there's always been questions about his defensive commitment. And if you've been following Real Madrid's matches this season, you will notice that both Mbappe and Vini have offered very little defensively in the games. When your forward doesn't press or cover, the rest of the team feels that burden. They have to share the pressure. And it puts extra strain on the midfield and backline, especially in the Enrique-style systems that rely on collective efforts. So when that leaked video came out, I think it makes a lot of sense because the PSG this season looked more balanced without him. Players were sacrificing for each other. They were pressing together, and you could see the harmony on the pitch because defensively they looked tighter. And offensively, they shared the responsibilities. But having said that, I think it doesn't mean Mbappe is not an elite. For me, he's still one of the most dangerous forwards on this planet. But he's also a player whose style needs to be carefully managed. At PSG, Enrique may have felt that building a team without Mbappe allowed for more tactical cohesion, and which is working the best for the team. But now at Real Madrid, the big question is, how will Xabi Alonso use him next season? Will he push Mbappe to commit more on the defensive side, or will he structure the team so someone like Vini will offer more, will sacrifice more off the ball? So I think either way, Real will also have to find that balance because having two world-class attackers who don't defend won't work at all when you're playing against top teams in Europe.
Before Mbappe joined Real Madrid, Real was the Champions League winner. Yeah. And after Mbappe left PSG became the Champions League winner. Luis Enrique made a very controversial comment this season during post-match press conference. He said PSG has become a better off team, both in defense and offense, without Kylian Mbappe. So, Brandon, why do you think a team can have this drastic change after one player left, especially a player like Kylian Mbappe?
I think he's been incredibly unlucky over the last season or two. I mean, with PSG's all of a sudden incredible success without him, and Real Madrid still having a relatively successful season. I mean, not getting the titles that they desired, but I mean, despite the numerous, defensive injury setbacks that they had, they still had a relatively strong Champions League campaign, and I would argue a very strong La Liga campaign. But I think the way that he's managed is incredibly important. So I think for someone like Luis Enrique, team cohesion and like a set game plan and very distinctive efforts from a combined 11 is probably more important than individual success. And I think that's something that PSG realized. And I don't think Mbappe is the only player that made them realize that. I think the lack of success that they had with, the greatest footballer of all time, Lionel Messi, whose work rate has never been questioned, with Neymar, whose work rate, I suppose, has been questioned, but, talent undeniable. I mean, Edison Cavani, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, all of these superstars have come in to PSG over the years and not been able to get that Champions League title. So maybe Mbappe was just the wrong sort of player for what PSG were aiming to achieve in the post-Messi and Neymar years in particular. And of course, we know Mbappe didn't do himself any favors either, particularly when he was at PSG. I think that he was always angling for a move away from PSG. I'll track back to Manchester United again. A lot of former players like Wayne Rooney and Paul Scholes and all of that sort of thing said that, when you've got a superstar like that in your midst and the manager kind of gives them free rein to do whatever is necessary to score goals, and, the team has to, do everything defensively and even offensively to get the ball to them, sometimes that leads to success. So it seems like at Manchester United, when Cristiano Ronaldo was having his best years, and even at Real Madrid, I don't know if Tianyu agrees with me, but a lot of the team tactics revolved around sheltering their superstars and kind of allowing them to focus purely on attack, and the rest of the team would just kind of plug gaps. And that worked for Ronaldo at Manchester United and Real Madrid, but it doesn't seem to have worked particularly well for Kylian Mbappe. Definitely not at PSG and at Real Madrid. But if you look at the numbers that Mbappe has put up for Real Madrid in terms of goals, I don't think there's much more that he could have done. I guess he could have pressed a little bit more and offered a bit more defensive cover, particularly when Real Madrid went through their defensive frailties. But maybe that's something that Ancelotti didn't demand of Kylian Mbappe, and maybe that's not something that he feels like he should do as a World Cup winner and as the best player in the world. Maybe he thinks that the rest of the team just needs to cover him to allow him to go on and score goals and win games single-handedly. So I don't know how much of the blame Mbappe deserves to shoulder in terms of not stepping up when it comes to offering the team more in terms of overall play, particularly in terms of pressing and defensive responsibilities. I mean, Dembele has become a superstar in that system, but would he be the same star at a different team where, he didn't have a leadership responsibility and defensive responsibility? Who knows, So I think some of it is down to the individuals, but I think a lot of it also has to do with the team that you're in, the coach that you are paired with, and what sort of responsibility you are given as a player and how you fit into a certain team's tactics. So I don't think there's more Mbappe could have done this season to try and assist Real Madrid to get success.
Right. Different coaches have different systems and different demands for superstars like Kylian Mbappe. Next season, Real Madrid will have Xavi Alonso in the coaching position. I don't know how it will impact Kylian Mbappe's role within the team. But to me, a lot of superstar players nowadays would assume they have some privileges on the pitch, like that of Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, who have less, defense obligations nowadays, especially in the latter stages of their careers. Jurgen Klopp once made a very famous comment: there's only one player in the world who doesn't need to defend, and that is Lionel Messi. And also Ronaldo, now we seldom see him involved in team defense, both with Al Nassr or Portugal. But the two legends had dominated the Ballon d'Or awards for too long.
Yeah.
So Tianyu, how do you think this has impacted young superstars' game mentality going into the games?
Well, I might sound a little bit biased here, but, Messi has been criticized plenty of times for walking on the pitch, not tracking back and being passive of the ball. So, yeah, I think when it comes to setting an example in defensive commitment, I don't think Messi should be the yardstick. But to be fair, I would say Ronaldo hasn't done much either defensively in his latter years, because he's been preserving his energy for explosive moments in attack. And frankly, when you're producing 40+ goal seasons, no one's asking you to press. So both of the squad was set up to support their offensive brilliance, Real Madrid and Barcelona. So that's just how brilliant and dominant Ronaldo and Messi were back at the times. So when it comes to how this will affect younger generation players, I think the lack of defensive work might send the wrong signal that, to some rising stars, like it's okay to conserve energy and let your teammates do the dirty work. But honestly, I think the real legacy of Messi and Ronaldo isn't about what they didn't do. It's about how they handled what they did do. So I think their professionalism, their consistency, and their mentality, that's the gold standard. The real lessons lie in their leadership, their discipline, and ability to show up every single game when the pressure is the highest.
Right. I like the comment from one Chinese commentator lately. He said some young players, they haven't reached the level of Ronaldo and Messi, but they already enjoy the rights of Messi and Ronaldo on the pitch.
Yes.
That may be the problem. Brandon, team honor and personal stats are very important in award selection criteria. But do you agree that nowadays game attitude and the leadership on the pitch are undervalued in public opinion towards those superstars? What's the Ballon d'Or standard in the post-Messi-Ronaldo era?
I agree. I think a lot of what these commentators have said, in terms of young players not willing to do the work and having the superstar status and just, feeling like they have the right to attack. I think a lot of them haven't earned it. I think Kylian Mbappe has, a World Cup winner and a superstar without question. But I think, all of these other players should rather focus on what Cristiano Ronaldo in particular has done in terms of training and taking care of his body and
Yeah.
doing everything that he can to do the best job that he can as an attacker, as opposed to just feeling like you don't have to work hard for the team and take up defensive responsibilities. But also this notion that someone like Kylian Mbappe has to set the standard for the entire team to do their job. Yes, I think he has to do that in training and in attack. But if he's supposed to be the catalyst for the team to defend, and he needs to be, the leader that inspires his team to defend through defensive responsibilities, I disagree with that. I mean, it has worked with Dembele, and the rest of the team at PSG. But I think someone in Kylian Mbappe, if I'm him and I'm hearing the coach say you need to step up defensively to inspire the team, I would also want to leave. So I think it really depends on a certain player in the team. But in terms of the Ballon d'Or gold standard, I think, look, a lot of it is down to stats and goals and glittery things like that. So I think, obviously Rodri's win was probably something that kind of broke that mold in the post-Messi Ronaldo dominant years in the Ballon d'Or, where a player's overall contribution to, club and national success was taken into just the same amount of consideration as goals and assists. And I think that is quite important going forward. I still think, if someone scores like 40 plus goals in a season and wins the Champions League or wins the World Cup or wins a continental title, I think that will often overtake someone in a team that might have been equally important to a team's success. I mean, I look at PSG, no one's talking about Donnarumma or Ashraf Hakimi and, Vitinha and all of these players that have been equally important to PSG's, domestic and continental success this season. But I think going forward, there will be more instances where, a player in a team that might have been more of a catalyst for their success as opposed to someone that provided, certain amount of assists and goals, will be considered. At least it is becoming a little bit slightly more diversified in recent years compared to the last decade or so, where it was just it wasn't a Ballon d'Or, it was a who's going to win, Messi or Ronaldo competition.
Let's see if Ousmane Dembele can win the Ballon d'Or award this year and how this will impact the future stars on the pitch. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.